Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Well, now, not so much. Cash is being used less and less, and it appears that central banks are moving towards the total elimination of cash. House Democrats have introduced stimulus bills that feature a digital fiat dollar, and the Chinese government is doing a test run on the digital yuan. But what does all of this mean? What would a cashless society actually look like? What does this mean for your cash? What does this mean for privacy? And what's the difference between cryptocurrency and a digital fiat currency? Now, I'm Ali from That's What the F Happens. Let's see what's happening with the cashless society. Never let a good crisis go to waste.
There will be so many small businesses that go under because of this.
Everyone just accepts this is what's necessary.
I'm sorry, there's enough there to make me skeptical.
It always says trust but verify.
It's a blind faith, but that's just not how we're built.
We don't have economics, we have intervention.
It's just so out of touch with the people, which
I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are not even aware of that.
Eight tiers down the rabbit hole.
Eight tiers.
We go.
Welcome back to That's What the F Happens. I'm Ali.
I'm Clay. We're going down the rabbit hole. Today, we're going to check out cryptocurrencies, currencies of all forms, digital cash. The topic is what?
We're going into today cashless society. What is it? What does it mean? What are the chances that when are we going to get there? Who stands to benefit? Who stands to lose? I just wanted to point out that cashless society, it's not new. The Mesopotamians had a cashless barter system 8,000 years ago.
Well, in a way, it's back to the future, right? Because exactly, as you said, the barter system, there were systems in place pre-currency. So in essence, and you could call it back to the future, or it's just a next logical step. Like anything, there's change, there are new developments. We're recognizing that there are inherent flaws to the cash system, and I think that's something we're going to speak about today. But it's interesting because you and I had our own conversation previously about the barter system and how it would look, for example, if you divested from any form of currency and relied on something like gold, and then
or silver.
How do you spend that? And the idea was, well, you have to barter in some form, and it gets a little bit nutty. You get down the rabbit hole, as we like to say, thinking about it. But in essence, that's the question you try to drill down at any academic level, is how to develop a system of exchange that satisfies all the parties involved. Because I think that's really what's difficult. The bartering system, it was haggling, right? You're like, hey, I got 2 chickens. For these 2 chickens, I want your 3 pieces of cloth or something wild, whatever it was. And
right.
There was a lot of back and forth, where the beauty of a currency is that it allowed a person to declare a price and a person to then have money in their pocket, and both people coming in sort of understanding certain terms already beforehand and knowing that there wouldn't be variation to that.
And also the idea with the currency is that you can get very, very precise. You can get down to cents on it. Whereas like you said, it's like two chickens, is it really worth 3 cloths or is it worth 4 cloths?
We're gonna have to cut one of these legs off. I'm keeping this leg, man. That's 10 cents worth right there.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing with precious metals. They come in certain sizes. They come in ounce sizes, half ounce sizes. What do you get for that?
Well, that gets to another thing that I've mentioned with respect to Bitcoin, which applies to Bitcoin, applies to gold. Any of these things that have a value beyond that of a currency, that they in essence are an insurance for a currency in some cases.
Or a hedge against.
Exactly. It doesn't make a lot of sense to spend them. Why would you spend something that has the potential to go up in value? Where if you spend $1, you're not feeling like if I spend this dollar a day, I'm going to regret it because tomorrow this dollar is going to be worth $2. You're not having that same
No, we know that the
anxiety.
price of the dollar is just going down. They just printed 2 trillion.
Well, that's a good somewhat. I mean, we've already touched on so many topics, so maybe we should rewind and well, one of the things I wanted to mention is since we are talking cash society, even before cryptocurrencies, which we'll talk about, and other digital forms of currency, which are not crypto, because that's a distinction we have to make. I do recall experiments in many parts of the world where ATMs and banking systems are not widely available, and parts of Asia, Africa, South America are often cited in this.
Or even just rural parts of America.
Well,
You
exactly.
get further way out there, you're in like Montana somewhere where, like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna drive like 200 miles to go to like a Target?
Yeah, or to access some sort of bank or ATM, and
Right.
and the point of this is that 20 years ago you were reading about systems developing in which uh, people were using phones as a form of exchange, and they had developed in rural Africa. They were talking about places like Kenya, Somalia, Rwanda. These um, mobile phones that were equipped to receive and make payments. So that was a precursor to, I think, a lot of crypto and digital currencies. This stuff existed as a concept.
Yeah, if you have internet,
Well, that was
that's one of the issues.
well, that was part of it. Also, is that in a lot of um, developing countries, what they discovered is that people didn't have uh, wireless access per se, but they did have mobile service. And so, it was the lowest barrier to entry was uh, to get a cell phone and then to conduct business via that cell phone. So in many ways, it makes you wonder if what is spread to the rest of the world really took place in some of the poorest, most developed.
Yeah, I mean, if you do that, then you have to get the ID 2020 so you can set up a bank account.
That's another rabbit hole we have to go down, that ID 2020. But so anyway, so I just thought we should mention that yeah, that I recall reading stories of that nature before I ever heard what Bitcoin is. But that gets us to I believe Bitcoin was the uh, that was the original crypto or digital currency that caught worldwide attention. And there was an individual, I think, that is widely credited for creating Bitcoin. And my understanding is it wasn't intended to be a cryptocurrency initially. It was just, again, supposed to be one of these peer-to-peer pay systems, like the cell phone that back and forth that I was describing. And the gentleman's name,
Something Yamamoto, something
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi, yeah.
But the bizarre part there is that no one knows who this guy. Like, apparently, it's never really been confirmed. Is he Japanese? Is he Asian? Is he even a human being? Is he just like some
Satoshi Nakamoto?
Yeah. So I mean, there's all this intrigue around him as an individual, but whoever he is or whatever he is, that's initially.
All right. So this guy's advanced. So blockchain technology is the technology that cryptocurrencies work on. And it's basically like a decentralized database.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's...
So instead of having like a centralized hub that you ask questions to and then it gives you information, it's the opposite. It's where something in the blockchain has data in it, and then all the other blocks in that chain verify that data. So like if the block is off, then it will reject it and it will be no good. That's why they trust it, because it's like a multi-user verification system for a database. And this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto,
crowdsourcing verification, right?
devised the first blockchain database.
Yeah, and it's perceived to be incredibly difficult to corrupt, to counterfeit, so that it ensures the purity of transactions, that there's less capability for someone to hack in and make off with someone else's money and things of that nature. But ironically, that's the
blockchain is the backbone of all these cryptocurrencies.
And it's become such a romantic idea that it's actually extended to the health. You know, they talk about blockchain in health systems. They talk about blockchain and security and all these. It's
like the best secure thing, but the problem is, like, what's the point of having security in your health system when someone can just scan your quantum dot and then there's all your health records right there? So it's like, we used to have security in our health. That's why we had HIPAA. But what's now happening post-coronavirus is your health records are everyone's business. Contact tracing that they keep talking about, hey, that's your health records being put out there.
Yeah. Well,
it's like,
I mean, if you have to prove to other people that you are immune to something, or that you have antibody, whatever the terminology they're running with right now, that's absolutely an invasion of your privacy. But like many things,
I like it. They're like, we could totally secure your health data with blockchain, but once it's secure, we're going to put it out there for everyone.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that the quantum technology is married to blockchain anyway. So that's a whole other discussion. But blockchain.
Oh no, I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. But like what you were saying is like, because you were saying health records, and that makes sense, because all I'm saying is, before, having security over your health records was a big deal. They made a federal statute, HIPAA, where like they have to bring people in who are like HIPAA certified to handle your medical records. Mm-hmm. But now all I'm saying is, it was nice to have HIPAA, but now we got to have contact tracing, because like you could have it and then contact everyone that you contact and they could have it. And then,
well, as we say, let no good crisis go to waste. Nothing like a scare to just strip away some privacy,
Yeah.
some freedoms.
There is no more privacy. And that's the thing also, when we were saying cryptocurrencies, I think we need to make very clear that there is a difference between a cryptocurrency and a digital fee and digital fiat. What we're talking about here when we talk about digital dollar, it's unknown whether
Well, we've mostly,
digital yuan is going to be digital fiat, because I've seen some articles that were saying that it was going to be a digital currency based on gold to try to undermine the international reserve system that overwhelmingly uses dollars almost exclusively for reserves.
yeah.
They're trying to like undercut that, but I don't know if it's going to have
Well,
gold backing, because if it has a gold backing, it really is going to undercut it totally.
well, let's rewind for a second, because we were talking Bitcoin, excuse me, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies, as you mentioned, with the blockchain, the systems for verification, the difficulty to counterfeit, all the benefits that they have, all the virtues. There are,
Which also those digital fiats would have all that. They would be on the blockchain. The Chinese yuan is on the blockchain. They're putting all their efforts into blockchain.
but
But the major difference is the anonymity. It's like
the
either you're on crypto and you're anonymous, or you got this digital fiat, and like not only are you not anonymous, they're all up in your business.
well, there's another distinction also. That's absolutely the cryptocurrency, just as the name suggests. The crypto aspect is that there is a level of privacy, a level of anonymity, as you mentioned. They're also independent for the most part of any government entity, whereas the digital currencies are mostly propping up, or popping up, I should say, in government systems, and China is the foremost example. But
through a central banking system, for sure.
And I mean, China's affiliation with digital currency should give you a lot of ideas of the implications it has. I mean, China isn't known as a completely free state by any means, and this is just another means to rule,
exercise social control,
monitor and socially control a billion plus people. And so with a digital currency, whereas cryptocurrency, you're able to exchange it completely anonymously, and the only tracking is within that blockchain, right? But it's more of the transaction itself, not so much the entities involved in that transaction, right? The digital currency, I heard in one report that this digital yuan that they would be issuing would not only be able to be tracked from your banking account, but it would actually give the Chinese government access to your account, which is next level kind of weirdness. Then again, it occurred to me, I would be naive to think that because my government has my direct deposit information, they don't have some sort of access to my
right.
Banking information and what I do. So
right, but this is the thing. Government has access to your account, but do they have access to your cash? You know what I'm saying? This whole thing is like, to be outside of that. That's the purpose that cash serves. So when we go cashless, we're like, all right, there's no way to really be outside of like the purview of government scrutiny, Big Brother, like looking into my accounts, looking at the numbers. Like that was one of the things that they said that they want to do. They want to make sure everyone pays their taxes. Yep. They were saying this money that they lose on tax revenue.
Every transaction becomes recorded. Everything is traceable.
By the government.
Let's try to imagine trying to buy a bag of weed or some cocaine or something illicit, and
you're gonna have to buy that in gold or silver.
Or I guess I would assume you'd have to
Crypto. You'd have to
No,
just
no.
go through Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, assuming cryptocurrency was an option, but otherwise, I suppose how you would get around it is if you were a drug dealer, you'd essentially have to offer some other product and sell that uh, with the drug as a way of enabling the transaction. So it's like, here, buy this bread, but inside the bread is whatever. But
Right, but you bought a loaf of bread for like 200.
it,
Which who knows? Like that might be the price based on how many dollars they've been printing off.
yeah. Well, it's interesting also that one of the you hinted at this, you touched on it, but um, the currency world is fascinating because it's a bit of a horse race for world dominance in a way, and the United States has dominated um, that scene for, I don't know, I guess maybe
Almost a century, really. It was like we dominated because of gold. We lied about how much gold we had, then people weren't gonna mess, and then we're like, oh, well, oil and reserve currency. I mean, the majority of transactions are done in dollars.
Well, and it became I mean, my understanding is it really just became dominant because of the ease of transaction and the faith in our private industry. You know, from what I've been reading, that was one of the citations there, is that um, the dollar became the de facto currency of trade, and the ease of doing business with the United States, people just said, well, fuck it, we're going to do it in dollars. And
Yeah,
so,
unless you're getting sanctions against you, then you have to trade yuan.
Hi, Cuba. And yeah, so the dollar became the de facto currency of trade, of exchange, and now China specifically is actively ramping up efforts to change.
Well, they've been doing it for about a decade. Both China and Russia have been trying to do it, and I think they were on the right path by stockpiling the gold, because I think that would be really the only way they could dethrone the dollar, would be to basically be like, it's backed by gold.
Well, yes and no, because again, what I was understanding is that for the business world, which likely conducts the majority of trade and exchange, they care more about just the ease, facility, and I don't think China would necessarily offer that, just because of the level of intrusion and involvement that they generally impose on. You know, look at the way you hear the horror stories you hear about businesses trying to operate in China, and just all the meddling that takes place. So that's a
deterrent for sure.
It's a deterrent and it's a strike against them. But having said that, that hasn't stopped companies from wanting to get into the Chinese market, and at a certain point, just I think volume is crucial, right? So like the more volume of anything taking place in
but also, if it just is like a reserve, though, like your reserve is just like how you're stacking, so if you're just stacking, say like how China has in reserve like $3 trillion that they just got, so if you're just holding it in it, I mean, I feel like I don't know, I would trust gold over just fiat any day, because it's like something that's real. And like,
well, but here's the thing is, I mean, we have conducted business for, again, over a century with fiat money.
Well, not really. We only really truly went fiat in the 70s when we went off the gold standard.
I thought we left the gold standard much earlier. I thought it was in the 20s or 30s.
No, it was Nixon, like 71.
Oh yeah,
pretty sure.
Interesting. Well,
yeah, because that was the thing. The whole gold standard thing. It was like, the gold standard was people were trading in dollars because they went off the gold standard in 1971. People were trading in dollars because they thought it was backed by gold. But the fact of the matter is America kept printing up more and more dollars, and people internationally were like, we don't think you have enough gold. We don't think you have enough gold. And then we were just like, America was basically like, no, we got the gold. We got the gold, but we didn't have the gold. And then eventually in 71, France took their reserves, which was like a boatload of dollars. You know what I mean? Imagine like billions of actual dollars, paper dollars, their reserves. They put them on a boat and they started sailing towards the United States to get to trade it in for gold, because basically internationally the confidence had that we were holding. That's why, like, also people, they say there's gold out there, but I always have the gut feeling that there's a lot less gold than they're saying is out there. That's why I wouldn't buy gold necessarily on a market exchange, because it's volatile like that. But regardless, the point of the matter was Nixon told them to turn around. They wouldn't turn around, and then because he knew we didn't have the gold, he signed some shit real quick to be like, we're going off the gold standard. And then we're just off the gold standard. We're on fiat money. It's propped up basically like by what you're saying, ease of use, because ease of use really because everyone accepts it. Everyone accepts it. The transactions are mostly in the only oil transactions that are not in dollars are with Iran, and China buys from them with the yuan, because they have all these sanctions against, like the U.S. has those sanctions against them. Well, that 90% of international transactions in 2019 were in U.S. dollars. Yeah. And about 60% of all the foreign exchange reserves are in dollars. I don't think that digital currency is a bad idea. I like it. I use it all the time. Credit cards, you get points. Yeah. Like debit card, I use that. Like PayPal, use that. Venmo, transfer to the friends, all that sort of stuff.
You just basically hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, in a lot of ways, many of us have gone cashless to a cashless society in our behavior, and it's digital currency in effect, right? Especially now, we can even just, you go into the subway now, you can just tap. You go to the grocery store, tap, everything's tap. I mean, there have been subtle or not so subtle efforts to push us away from cash, and there are businesses out there that are entirely cashless, and they will not accept your cash, and that's a whole other discussion we could have about.
Look, I won't take cash.
You won't take cash? So again, that's a portion of what we needed to discuss. Is, I mean, there are some real benefits and things that we seek as human beings, and also out of our sheer laziness and desire for ease. Because
the key word is cashless. All right, so I'm all for less cash, but I'm not for cashless. And the main reason why I'm really the main reasons I personally don't think that cashless is a good look is A, like we've discussed, the privacy issue, and B, negative interest rates. So like that's pretty dangerous, because
you should elaborate on that.
Okay, so the idea is this. I mean, I think the EU already had some negative interest rates, is that people pay people to borrow money. So, like if you borrow money, you pay to borrow it, like you get 2%, 3% interest rate. Mm. It's like reverse of that, where like you borrow money and they pay you like 2% to borrow it.
And
when you put money in the bank, you're lending money to the bank.
Right.
And then they hypothetically pay you an interest rate. But if it's a negative interest rate, you're paying them to hold the money for you. So if that's the case, you'll either want to save less or spend.
I see.
And the problem with that is like how you inoculate against that is if that's the case, then you can just be like, all right, well, I'll just hold my money in cash and
Okay,
not have
so
you eating away my savings.
now I follow. The negative interest rate is not at the macro level. It's at the micro level as the consumer, where you're not going to pay. I do that all the time. Like, a lot of banks actually, they're not calling it negative interest rates, but what they do is
Calling it fees.
well, they impose fees specifically if you or if you use a savings account, for example, and maintain a balance under a certain amount.
It's like, what if that's your life savings? What if you're saving for retirement and they're like charging you interest to hold it? How do you get around that? You hold, like, all right, so how would you get around that?
The first thing I would do is, well, I did it. I said, okay, I'm not putting any of my money in savings. And an extreme of that is you don't put any of your money in the bank. And that's funny because you and I were watching the video yesterday in which the head of the FDIC was discouraging people from withdrawing all their money from the banks during the coronavirus scare and saying,
Right.
now's not the time to have a run on banks, because this happens a lot. We've like,
And also with fractional reserve, the banks don't have any, and we know that the Fed got rid of fractional reserve, so the banks don't have to keep any reserves, hypothetically.
Well, so sorry about that. So we've seen the runs on banks in like Argentina and Spain, Italy, all these places.
Venezuela.
Well, we're going to begin the show in Venezuela, where we find people taking bags full of nearly worthless cash to the shops as inflation goes wild. Now, that's been going on for months, but the new problem is that as of a few hours ago, Venezuelans are not allowed to withdraw more than 10,000 bolivars a day. Now, that's just the equivalent of $5. The country's economy, which depends heavily on oil, has been crippled by low crude prices for many months. Juan Carlos Lamas has more from Caracas.
This has become a common sight in Venezuela's public and private banks. After shortages of food, medicine and other basic staples, there is now a shortage of cash in circulation, making the lives of Venezuelans even more challenging.
Yeah, you get that. And effectively what's taking place is exactly what we're describing, in which you lose all faith in the government to insure your money and the banks to actually have your money and the value of your money. And so it's like, well, shit, I got to get it out before it disappears into thin air, or before it becomes...
Yeah, how about people in Greece? Like, their money disappeared into thin air.
Man. So, I mean, it's scary because as Americans, it's always been somewhere far off. And it's been a newsreel for us. It's been something, and this is I'd say it says a lot about our society, about our school system, that no one ever said, well, this is something we should truly learn. I mean, the fact that you and I are here having a conversation and trying to like almost like making sense of it on the fly, which that's unfortunate also, but it's a testament to the fact that is by design. I mean,
it's for sure by design.
As you say, like
listen, we know for one that they put us on that Prussian schooling system so that people wouldn't have the tools to be able to critically think. They literally did that on purpose.
Well, I mean, part of it is look at. I think a lot of us learn to
we outsource our thinking to the experts.
Well, here's the thing: is I think there are plenty of us that are critical thinkers, but as a critical thinker, there's so much going on in the world. It's hard to know what you should drill down on or into and focus on, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and the media's connection to that is they're throwing all this bullshit at you day in and day out and talking about this nonsense here, this hell. Like if well,
they're driving the topic, so that's the thing is with the media is that they drive the topic, and then people just like latch on to what it is that what they hear in the news cycles.
And then
So
there's a lot of repetition that, I mean, unfortunately, I would say
it's like parroting. It's like straight up parroting, and then you hear people, they just repeat these catchphrases without like a true understanding of like
well,
what the true history was and how they got there.
and a perfect example of that is with the coronavirus. I mean, everybody overnight became, I can't tell you how many people I knew personally that were like, you got to social distance. The quarantine is necessary. We've got to flatten the curve. All these people, like.
Right, you're like, based on what? Are you like
Well, it's like,
how do you like? Where do you get this?
Yeah, I'm like.
Oh, you saw it on TV.
Well, when you hear people saying flatten the curve, I'm like, that's not something you came up with yourself, right? Like that's something.
You never came up with social distancing either. Like
I mean,
these are all things
but
that
at
the
least
media
social,
gave.
but at least social distancing. I mean, it sounds like selfie or something. Like someone could have some like,
Because there's a word social in it, so it reminds you of social media.
yeah, like it's
like,
and it's very easy to understand. But like when someone's like flatten the curve, I'm like, what curve? Like, what? Show me this curve you're talking about. And then but I mean, it just I'm just doubling down on the
or
idea.
contact tracing. We need contact tracing.
Well, that's the interesting thing there is no one's talking about that. So I mean,
They are now.
Well, I only found out about it because we got down a rabbit hole myself. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes involved, but I mean, again, everything's beta, right? It's they're still trying to develop the problem for us to react to. I don't think contact tracing hasn't gotten full problem yet. Otherwise,
It kind of is, though. I mean, that's the thing, is what they're saying is they need a way. They've been saying they need a way to figure out who's got it. We need more testing. We need to find out who those people got in contact with. Like, we need to know this information. That way we can flatten the curve.
so are they widely using that now? Because I mean, I'm a little more.
They were. I mean, this is the thing. What happened, from as far as what I heard on that, not to get too off topic, but I think Google released people's like cell phone data of like where they were when they were making searches at some point and gave it to the government. But we know that Alphabet Corporation is basically like an extension of alphabet agencies.
Well, I shared that with you. I shared I forget what the company's name was, but they very openly shared their data on. They said, look, we have all this data on where people are, and it shows us that people are social distancing, and they were like trumpeting it like it was like, people.
Look how good we're doing.
Yeah,
look how good we're doing.
And then you're like, wait a minute, these motherfuckers are sitting here tracing our every movement to ensure we're social distancing. What else could you do with that type of information? What other types of power does that give you? It's like,
right.
and the fact that they were like sharing it so openly, and like it was.
Well, James Evan Pilato would say, "There's an easy answer for that. Leave your phone at home when you leave," but nobody can do that. Like my dad is maybe the only one besides James Evan Pilato that can pull that off.
Well, you do have people that they abandon the smartphone, which I think is that's a smart start, because hell, if you abandon the smartphone, it's pretty easy to just leave it places. Also, like me, I don't get phone calls that much. I'm barely texting during the day. I screw around on the thing more than anything. It's like a goddamn toy. So if I had a phone that didn't have all the toys and all the apps and everything on it, I could totally leave it on. I mean, that's the allure of this damn thing, is that it's so much more than just it's not a phone anymore. Shit, I don't fucking.
It's the answer to every question you could ever have.
It's the answer to every question you never asked. They were like, you need a camera on you at all times, and a video camera, right? And games, and the list goes on and on, of the ability to buy stocks, the ability to bank. Some of these things absolutely are beneficial to us in the same way that cashless society, trying to bring this full circle. some
All
of these
right,
things are
so
absolutely beneficial. Which, by the way, if we are going full circle, cashless society, um, we should talk about why our government and certain individuals in our government seem to think it's such a wonderful thing. And I will say that there's a reason why we should be talking about that, because first of all, our government are the what two different bills that were introduced in the aftermath of the quarantine, the shutdown, featured language to introduce a digital currency here in this country. And
yep.
personally, my first of all, my knee gut reaction is that I think they did that just to try to give the semblance of we are
Keeping up with China.
keeping up with China, because they were already unveiling theirs. That they're already hitting their country with a digital dollar, and it is actually absolutely significant because again, the race to have the dominant currency is real, and the digital yuan is an attempt to invade our space there. So I think it lit a fire under our country in terms of, oh shit, we need to do something. So like the classic bluff. Oh, let's put it in this bill. What is everybody said? What the fuck is this doing here? Why have we never? Why have we never heard anything about this until all of a sudden during like this national emergency when people?
Well, they need to be able to get the money to you as quickly as possible. But God forbid you're one of the 16% of Black families that are unbanked, or the 14% of Latino families that are unbanked.
Well, and that's the thing, is that the argument was that those were some of the champions of the digital currency are people that generally fight for minority families, and they are cognizant of the underbanked and the unbanked, which are Latino families, Black families. So that I think the idea is that a digital currency could even circumvent a bank, which I think there was language in there that the banks had to be some sort of pass through or whatever. Um, but uh, you know, I do believe that one of the beauties of a digital currency is you don't fucking need a bank anymore. Hell, the government, IRS, could go straight from.
Right, it's straight from the central bank to
I
you.
mean, what do you do if you get a check mailed, right? You have to go to the bank to cash it. So the banks have to be involved in some way, but the government is sending it directly to you.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess we're
But
talking
but
about just a digital currency,
but
not
but
necessarily cashless now.
well, the digital currency, to answer your question, there would be some way to verify receipt, right? I mean, if they, because hell, if you can create a digital currency, I think, to my thinking, within that digital currency, you have that blockchain, right? So there's a way to verify that it was sent, that it was received, that it was spent in some form or fashion, in some fraction. All this could be done. A bank doesn't need to be involved in any of those steps, right?
Right.
Blockchain is effectively the bank. That's the beauty of it. The blockchain is the ledger, and that's what a bank kind of does, right? It's the ledger. It's okay. You put in $200, you spend $100, you put in another 50. It's a fucking ledger. It's an account, right? So the blockchain achieves some of that. So I think the banks, speaking of just another horse race, that they have to find their way to be involved in this and not get cut out. But I think we're so behind on this that, I mean, hell, what did that language last, like a day, and then they took it out? But it was long enough for everyone to be like, what the fuck? We're talking about a digital currency. And of course, all the people, all the speculators that, Bitcoin and all this, they all like perked up. But of course, if you're a fan of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, you hate the idea of a digital currency because you like the anonymity, you like all the things that make a crypto that a digital currency issued by the United States wouldn't.
And also just the more of idea of like being able to like gamble and like win big and like lose big. It's like, I feel like a lot of people I know who are into crypto, they're into it for like I don't want to say like the gambling aspect of it, but like kind of like the game. Yeah,
the speculative. I mean, but that again goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I don't see how something that you're constantly speculating on in that way could ever become your day-to-day currency.
right.
You can't have a currency that has wild swings like that. Like that's like, well, it's funny because we talk about oil as, you know, the backing for the dollar, but think about that, like the dollar, like how it has, I mean, I'm sorry, how oil has these wild swings, and so like the price of gas, the price of oil is constantly changing. You know, like what the fuck, like so unpredictable. I don't, I can't, I've never lived in a world where your dollar was worth, you know, $1.50 one day, and then the next day is $1.69. You know, which I feel like would be the case if some speculative cryptocurrency were the backbone. So, you know, that I think that's one of the reasons why you have all these parties involved. Why most people would say yes, you need the government, the, the government involved, and I think that speaks also to the fiat aspect. Is that with um, with fiat, if you have some sort of assurance that there is some intrinsic value, that there really is something backing that currency, then it makes it more legitimate. And that's the problem, I think, with like Bitcoin and things of that nature. People are saying, well, where's this value derived, right? And what I notice is that there's actually a variant on Bitcoin that it seems to me seeks to it. I think that it's called Bit Gold. Have you heard of this? And the
No,
idea was it's like supposed to be Bitcoin, but it's backed with gold. And I think
that would be amazing.
well, they're doing this with a variety of cryptocurrencies now. They're saying, well, wait a minute, like we like the idea of crypto, but we want to stabilize the value. And I think to that effect, that was the stable coin that was mentioned by what was his name, Joe Swan, the investigative journalist. The guy that was speaking on RT. When you share that RT video, he talked about stablecoin, which the whole idea behind stablecoin is, you know, stabilize the cryptocurrency by pegging its value to something real world.
Customers buy a digital token that is backed by 1 troy ounce worth of gold held in a London vault.
There you go. So the idea is it's a crypto, but its value is shared in a way that, like, look at fucking Bitcoin. First of all, was like 19,000 a coin, like a few months ago, and then it dropped down to like 7,500 or whatever. And people are like, first, this is one of the problems with, you can't have these wild swings like that. It's too unpredictable. It's too risky. And then you got the people that are like, where is the worth in this coin? Like, what makes it valuable?
What I wanted to do is just to get like a little bit back on track to what we were talking about. Just to basically say, it's like, all right, so first and foremost, who wants this cashless society? It's governments, financial institutions, and central banks. So what is it that they openly say is the reason why they want to have a cashless society? Is to fight terrorism, to fight drug cartels, to stop money laundering, to stop tax evasion. And by the way, tax evasion, you guys think it's like some mobster, but it's really the waitress that brought you your coffee who gets paid in a cash tip. It's like your barber who you gave that cash tip to. They want to make sure that these people are paying taxes and not just claiming the absolute minimum. Of course, as always, the war on drugs. Any war,
tax collectors. It's a tax collector's wet dream.
Yeah, the IRS is all over this thing. But you know, any war that they have, it's the war on drugs, the war on drug cartels, the war on terrorism. All that stuff is a reason why they think that this is a great thing. That's their overt, outspoken reasons why they think this cashless society is good. Now, the people who oppose the cashless society, it's based on surveillance. People don't want to be surveilled. They don't want to be under the microscope. And then you think, like, who would this hurt? This would hurt, like I said, your waitresses, your barbers, those people would hurt. It would hurt elderly people who are not good with, like, technology. It would hurt people who live in remote areas that don't have access to good internet connection. It would hurt those folks, or it would be harder for those folks to use it.
It hurts everyone that is an advocate for privacy and anonymity. I mean, if you feel like, look, I mean, let's talk. What becomes of someone who pays for pornography, or someone who pays for a gun, or someone, things that can become easily politicized or scrutinized.
And for sure, they've said that one of the reasons that they like this cashless is because it can eliminate black markets. It makes everything above board so that everyone who's supposed to get their cut gets their cut, including big data.
Well, that's definitely a lot of these government watchdogs and people that, if you're fearful of drug cartels and whatnot, that the boogeyman in this is always, the drug cartels are using the cryptos, and you're spending the money on Silk Road, and you have all these dark web.
Right, and then or also they just have hella, like, stockpiles of cash. Like in all those drug movies I watch, they just got crazy cash. They're like burying cash in the backyard. Yeah. They've got cash that's like gone bad and rotted.
Well, crypto,
you see Narcos, you know how it goes.
Never think in a million years that this beautiful home here on the corner of Northwest 77th Path and 169 Terrace could be behind a massive drug operation. It is the largest cash seizure in Miami-Dade police history. Over $24 million found inside the Miami Lakes home of Luis Gonzalez Hernandez. Police raided that home Tuesday and says the cash was behind this wall in the attic, packed in orange Home Depot buckets, 150 grand in each bucket. A loaded Tech-9 firearm was also taken from the home.
I would never, ever had thought that would have been something that was going on in this neighborhood.
Well, because cryptocurrency is a easy, anonymous way to launder cash. You just take that money and you buy some Bitcoin.
And the main thing that's involved in laundering cash is the big banks and the accounting firms.
Millions of American families rely on the bank HSBC for everything from checking accounts to mortgages. But today the bank agreed to pay a record amount to the United States government, nearly $2 billion. The government says the bank did business with known drug lords, Iran, even banks associated with Al-Qaeda. As Brian Ross reports, many are asking tonight, how did the bank manage to avoid criminal charges?
When the most ruthless of the Mexican drug cartels wanted to hide their money, they went to HSBC. So did terror groups, including Hamas and Al-Qaeda, along with Iran and other countries on the U.S. financial blacklist. All customers of a bank known well around the world.
HSBC, the world's local bank.
Today, U.S. authorities said they were finally holding the British-based bank accountable. HSBC had agreed to pay a record $1.92 billion in fines and forfeitures.
The largest forfeiture amount ever.
But given much less prominence in the announcement was a deferred prosecution agreement with HSBC, in effect meaning there will be no prosecution of the bank or its top executives, despite more than a decade of dealing with criminals and terrorists.
This is a very just, very real, and very powerful result.
So you don't think the bank got off easy?
No, and I don't think the bank thinks it got off easy.
But with $38 billion in profits over just the last 2 years alone, HSBC can easily afford its $1.92 billion payment.
This is a signal to other banks that if you do this kind of stuff, you'll get a parking ticket, you'll pay the fine, and you'll move on.
Since this summer, when HSBC executives ducked questions from ABC News, the bank's lawyers have argued that a successful prosecution of HSBC could have put the bank out of business in the U.S., costing lots of jobs and disrupting financial markets. And in the end, U.S. officials apparently agreed that in many ways, HSBC became simply too big to prosecute. The bank said today it is profoundly sorry, but for a small percentage of its yearly profits, HSBC has demonstrated how big banks can get away with crimes that would send others to prison for years and years, Diane.
Brian Ross reporting in. Thank you, Brian.
They launder more than double the amount of cash that is through in the form of cash, basically more than double of everything else.
Well, first of all, because
or crypto.
Think about this. Most drug transactions are done in dollars, right? And we just talked about why banks are so starved for cash deposits, right? So drug dealers dealing completely in cash are a wet dream for a bank because they're ferrying in a whole bunch of dollars that they need to put somewhere. You know, hell, those of us that we use cash in our day to day, we take our little $50 or $100 and we're spending that almost immediately. It's spending so little time in the bank, right? And it's certainly not in a savings account. So
yeah, hoarding cash. So there's that. So then also another thing that I noticed was that the one country that always seems to come up when you Google country cashless is Sweden.
Yep.
Sweden seems to be the one that's closest to being cashless. It also appears that India, and another way that we can see that we're going to a cashless society is that we've seen over time many different countries eliminate the larger currency bills. So right now, the biggest currency that's in print that is the 100, but there used to be like a 500, 1,000, 5,000. They used to have all these huge bills. They don't have anymore.
And also, you know, I assume
and
that
even I heard that recently India, they basically told them that they had to trade in, redeem their big bills because they were no longer going to be accepted.
Well, a couple of things I recall there. First of all, with Sweden, I recall a couple of years back reading about this has been years in the making for Sweden, and long before it became in vogue here, they were doing like cashless restaurants and bars and stuff like that. And one of the things I recall is that Sweden's an interesting place, man, because they have a really high trust in government, which is
it's like the opposite. They said that one place that like is the opposite of Sweden is Germany, where like they hold on to cash because they don't trust government. They are suspicious and they want less government involvement. So they're really into cash.
That's also the reaction to life in a completely totalitarian government-run state, you know, which they, you know, that's a lesson that they've learned, and it's interesting because Sweden actually was impacted by Nazi Germany's behavior, but you know, like you said, these are two countries that have just reached completely different extremes, and within Germany, I think that the area that's ironically the most anti-government these days is like the Bavaria, which is like that was like the cradle of Nazism. So I mean, if I
could see it. It's too much government, and now we're like, nah, we're not messing with government.
Well, by the way, I think it's worth noting that there are some key players whose names popped up. I thought it was kind of fascinating that Representative Maxine Waters had her imprint on these bills, and I was like, well, why the hell Maxine Waters? First of all, as far as I can tell, she has no financial background or economic background. I mean, she was like a community organizer, yet she's managed to rise through the ranks to being the chairwoman of the House Committee on Financial Services, which I hadn't heard of really, and apparently it's actually pretty influential for, you know, its oversight over banking. Now it has oversight over crypto, and they're going down that rabbit hole on Maxine Waters. I read bit about her involvement in, along with others on her committee, was involved in pressuring Facebook, because Facebook was rushing last year to unroll their own form of digital currency called Libra.
Facebook's new digital currency has the tech and finance worlds buzzing. Facebook says Libra is intended to provide financial services to the billions of people around the world who don't have access to traditional banking. It works like this. Libra can be kept in a digital wallet, available in Messenger and WhatsApp, as well as a standalone app. It'll run on Facebook's own version of blockchain technology, a type of encrypted network used by cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. And unlike volatile Bitcoin, the value of Libra will be backed by a financial reserve for added stability. Facebook's newly set up subsidiary, Calibra, will handle the transactions. And in a bid to reassure users concerned about privacy, Facebook says financial information will be handled separately from social network data.
We heard people loud and clear. They don't want their financial data commingled with their social data, and they certainly don't want their financial data being used for ad targeting and all these things. And so that's what we're doing. Basically, Facebook Inc. will not have access to financial data that you'll have inside of Calibra.
Facebook won't have full control of Libra. It's just one member of the Libra Association, made up of 28 founding partners.
And one of the things I find fascinating is that our government is getting nervous about Facebook's development of a digital currency, because they believe it will completely undermine our whole currency system. So,
that's not what they said. They said it was going to be. They said that there were so many concerns because Facebook obviously didn't care about the user's personal information, that they couldn't be trusted with this Libra currency because they've already proven that they're not trustworthy.
Well,
I guess we're supposed to trust government instead.
They did. That was one of their arguments, is that that was one of the ways that they attempted to undermine Facebook, and more than undermine them, question their role as the
and then Facebook said, but we got the Libra coalition.
It is pretty wild to think that one company could by itself could control, or a consortium of companies could effectively control the currency of the world, which in many ways would make them,
or a currency of Facebook. I don't even use Facebook, so I wouldn't even be involved in that.
It is interesting because I think it still has a lot of users, and again, if they
also said it would help people give money to people in remote areas that use Facebook or something. I don't know.
Which I could see, because again, that speaks to what I was saying at the beginning of the conversation about how this has been going on for ages in rural parts of the country, where it's like you ping money through a freaking mobile phone easily. So I could see it happening through something like Facebook. And don't forget, Facebook owns Instagram. So even though you don't use Facebook, you use Instagram, and they do remind you all the time that there's a connection. They're like, hey, this friend from Facebook is on IG and whatnot. And
true.
Like, and
so maybe I could use Libra through Instagram.
But I did find it fascinating that
you could buy some followers with Libra.
Over a year ago, they were getting pushback from the U.S. government, and there was a quote. If you give me a moment, I'll pull up the quote in which one of the representatives specifically spoke to the threat that Libra represented to the United States currency.
But then there was also the guy from North Carolina that was like, I don't know, it could be all right.
Representative Maxine Waters said, ultimately, if Facebook's plans come to fruition, the company and its partners will wield immense economic power that could destabilize currencies and governments. So that's Representative Maxine Waters herself confessing that this is an existential threat to governments and their role as the dominant players in the currency world. So, that's not a very veiled attempt at reining in the competition and viewing.
Well, that's the thing is the government likes to have a monopoly on money, a monopoly on violence, a monopoly on control, rules. The government really, it's a monopoly on control.
Well, on certain things, it is ironic that there are a lot of anti-government types, Republicans, I would say, that are all for
libertarians.
They're all for private enterprise, and let's let the private industry figure this out. And there were a lot of people arguing.
Nah, but they're always for bailout private industry.
We talked about that a couple episodes back, how Trump and other Republicans have been responsible.
They're always for give money to big corporations.
Well,
don't give it to like the little guy.
And Republicans are always big government when it comes to military, police. Exactly, certain things. So it's a bit of a misnomer to call any Republican anti-government, but
no, they're statists. They're both statists. I feel like when we're talking Democrat and Republican, they're both statists because they're heavily involved and intertwined in this state system.
Absolutely. So
they just are trying to use it for whatever means suits them the best.
But by the way, beyond Representative Maxine Waters, who is a Democrat pushing for digital currency, but wanting it to be.
Well, so it seems like the Democrats are the ones pushing it. It was a Democrat that introduced the first bill, and now this next bill is from the Muslim lady out in Minnesota. She's putting it like the bill has a great name. It's like I wish I could remember the name, but it was great.
Is it Tlaib or is it? Yeah. Well, but here's the thing though, because Steve Mnuchin, who is Treasury Secretary, who is appointed by Trump, Republican, he has been stumping for a digital currency. So again, it's not Democratic specific. It's not big government specific. The so-called small government Republicans are arguing for digital currency also. And Mnuchin, who knows what the motivations for these individuals are, but Mnuchin certainly cited the development of China's digital currency as a cause for our country to be exploring the option. So I think where Republicans find themselves in the bind is, as much as Republicans, as you and I are both acknowledging, our status are very much big government when it favors them. They do have a tendency to say, well, let private industry private industry do it. It's best if private industry does it. They're more effective.
Right, but what they're basically saying is transfer the money from government to private industry. Let private industry get those contracts.
We had talked about the coronavirus and how that has a role in this right now, because people are apprehensive about the exchanges of any sort right now, passing a dollar to you. And we've always talked about how dollars are, they're talk about a germ incubator.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
This could have been in a stripper's booty, is like always like the line you like to hear people say, right? And yes, possibly. And I ain't watched it. So yeah, they are filthy. And heck, that's another argument for maybe why we shouldn't have cash. But at the same time, the fear we're all experiencing right now with contact with people, with contact with things, germs everywhere, it has a lot of people thinking, "Oh, do I want to have this cash, or do I want to go to the bank and pull out cash when I could just use a card and it's tapless, it's contactless, and everything is so much easier, and there's fewer germs to worry about." So, not saying that I
agree. I would rather do that than cash, but at the same time, a lot of times I would rather pay cash. For example, like if you go to a bar, to certain bars in Miami, like if you use a card, they put like a $300 hold on your card, and it takes like over a week for it to get off. And when I'm in those places, I just pay cash.
Right,
Because I'm either using I don't use a credit card for that. I would use like a straight up debit card, and then I would have I would have all this money tied up. It was really annoying.
I carry cash around in the city because there are lots of sort of mom and pop institutions that I support that they don't really operate in cards. Maybe they have cards and whatnot, but they really prefer that you wouldn't use cards and you would go with cash, because they get hosed on fees by the credit card company, right? And
correct.
That's a whole other thing we haven't talked about, is how small businesses, how going cashless for small businesses is actually hurtful. It's harmful.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I accept a card, it's like over 2% transaction fee, plus there's like a certain amount of fee per transaction, like 50 cents per transaction, plus a percentage of like how much it is. It's like,
well, and so
that's annoying. That is annoying.
So one attempt to somewhat circumvent that is you got a lot of delis and small businesses that will put a minimum, right? And supposedly, I if I remember correctly, the city tried to crack down on that, saying it was illegal or whatnot, and probably with the help of
big business,
of credit card companies.
Right.
But I think there was enough of a pushback because I think there are like bodega unions and whatnot, and they were like, "You're just going to drive us all out of business." And that's the thing, is the cashless society could drive them out of business if you can't operate in cash in the way that makes your business viable, and you're paying out the wazoo in fees. That could spell the end of a lot of these businesses, because the margins are so slim, and now I got to give X amount of money to some credit card company or whoever would be the arbiter in that. So they're a loser in that. And
cost of doing business, tax.
Yep.
May not go to the government, but you're being taxed on that transaction.
Life as we know it, man. Well, I think we had a good discussion, man.
I think so too. Any last words you want to say on cashless society? All I really want to say is, as always, I want my privacy. I don't want Big Brother looking at me. I don't want 1984. I don't want Orwellian situations. I do like cashless options, but I don't want it to be 100% cashless, because I still think cash has a lot of viability out there for the reasons that we discussed as well. Any last words that on cashless society for you?
Absolutely. I think, like every other conversation we have, we just continue to get down all these other rabbit holes. Every conversation we have splinters into all, because these things all tie together. Like everything in life, there are correlations, there are connections, and I mean, just to have this conversation I think is healthy, but I think we should have a healthy fear of going fully cashless. I think there could be some negative repercussions. I also feel it's looking pretty inevitable it'll happen eventually, and we're essentially swimming against the tide if we're resistant. So who knows what the future holds, but I'm not necessarily sanguine on what.
Well, as long as you still have cryptos to operate outside of the lines, if you want, then.
Well, the problem, and this could be another discussion, is cryptos, to me, feel like it's like owning stock. It's like something you have to be wealthy enough to own the crypto to be able to operate outside of the conventional system that they establish, and so that already skews the things in favor of the wealthy. I mean, and that could be what happens, is the wealthy get to operate independently of the cashless society with their cryptos and whatnot, and with complete anonymity, and they can be perverts and buy guns and do everything that they might be judged for doing without that scrutiny, where the rest of us, they know our every move. So that's another thing to consider. But that's what we do. We always getting down some rabbit hole. We get down the rabbit hole because that's.
Hey, well, thanks for tuning in to episode 8 of That's What the F Happens. Today we were talking about cashless society.
Cashless society.
I mean, cashless society. I mean, like strip clubs. It's gonna be so whack. It's gonna be horrible.
It's like the old joke where you like swiping the credit card down there.
Like the whole fun is giving the dollar.
Can't make it.
The dollar in yourself.
Can't make it rain with credit cards. You only got like 4 of them, and then you're like, oh
my
shit,
God.
now
So it's horrendous. Like just the thought of that is just.
Yo, bro, talk about a rabbit hole to go down though. Like, what if we invented like a digital coin specifically for strip clubs, so like you could still make it rain?
Right, a digital coin.
Or a digital
paper coin. Well, we'll call it paper coin.
Yeah, digital, the stripper coin, and it's just you pay like
erotic coin.
You pay $100 for like 105 worth of stripper coins to make it rain. Yo, we might be onto something. Get down the rabbit hole, baby.
All right, thanks for tuning in.